Coming up next on Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable, a referendum against election law changes appears headed for next year's ballot. Attorney General Tom Horne says he'll fight in order to return disputed campaign donations. And Secretary of State Ken Bennett wants a court-ordered change in federal voting registration forms. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining me tonight are Jim Small of the Arizona Capital Times, Jeremy Duda of the Arizona Capital Times, and Steve Goldstein of KJZZ Radio. Looks like voters will get a chance to decide on a long list of election law changes. Give us an idea here, Jim, exactly. This was the stuff that was passed toward the end of the session. A lot of controversy here. Enough signatures collected so far?
So far, it looks like they will have enough signatures to qualify for the ballot, with the caveat being that there's likely to be some litigation coming down the pike to try to keep it off the ballot. But as it goes right now, in terms of the verification that county recorders have done on the signatures that were turned in, it looks like they will have enough. I think the latest tally we got back from the Secretary of State's office was that county recorders had essentially the verification was about 105,000. There's a potential for that number to grow a little bit more to get closer to 110,000 or so, depending on when it's three more counties that have yet to finish their verification. So when they do, the challenge is going to be for the people that support this law, that when and if they go to court, the challenge is going to be, can they find reasons to get enough of those signatures tossed off? And if they're able to do that, then then we could see this thing not go to the ballot. But right now it looks like it's on its way there.
If the signatures are valid, law is put on hold, correct?
Yeah, everything on that. And this could have a major impact on the election next year. I mean, most of these provisions really undermine Democrats and help Republicans, which, I think the opponents of the law would tell you is the exact point of it. But this prevents prevents people from going door to door to collect people's early ballots. It makes it easier to take people off of the permanent early voter list. These are, staples of Democratic get out the vote efforts, and, I'm sure they'll be now that they can still do it, they'll be putting it to good use next year.
From the standpoint of someone who covers this, not quite as much as Jeremy and Jim do, I'm actually quite intrigued by the fact that if it gets on the ballot, it could really cause an even more interesting wedge when we get to the actual Secretary of State's race. We've already seen some fights within the Republican Party in terms of who's going to win that race, but the Democrats are still sort of searching for that strong Secretary of State candidate, and I wonder if this, we won't know, but if this seems to be a fact of getting on the ballot, that might make a stronger Democrat stand up and say, hey, this could be a real wedge issue in this election.
Well, I think this will, Michelle Reagan, state senator, who is the person who drafted most of these provisions, I mean, at least in the Republican primary, I think she very well might hang her head on this. This is all stuff that's going to be popular with the Republican primary electorate. Maybe less so in the general election, but it's hard to say. In the Secretary of State's race, it's a down ballot race. Most people are going to be going on party identification. So Republicans generally have the upper hand in that race.
It's usually a down ballot race, and people usually do this. But an issue like this, especially as a referendum on that same ballot, that could, as Steve mentions, if you have the right candidate in there, if Democrats or an independent or libertarian, whatever, if you got the right candidate, you could make some noise, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could, but again, that's kind of a big if, and Steve's right. Right now, they don't have that person identified yet. There's a couple of Democrats, I think, that are looking at potentially running, a couple that are exploring, but no one's really kind of jumped out and taken the lead on it, and whether whoever the Democratic candidate is, whether they can get the funding to convey that message as well. That'll be the next hurdle to get over.
And we always come back as well to this Latino voting monolith that we always want to say is going to have a big impact. This is a huge issue, and one would think that would bring out Latino voters, but will it? Will enough be registered?
Do we have a timetable as far as when all the counties have to report and when the Secretary of State does have to have a final verification and certification?
I'm not entirely sure on that.
Okay. Any idea?
Yeah, the final due date for these counties to get this stuff in is November 4th. But they'll probably, I think the expectation is they'll get it in before that, and then I think once they get it in, I think the Secretary of State's office has maybe 3 or 5 days to kind of certify the results and declare that yes, this has enough signatures.
So one way or the other, we should know relatively soon if this thing's going to be on the ballot, A, and B, if everything in that law is suspended.
Yeah, well, as soon as the Secretary of State's office finishes its work, then we'll have the lawsuit against it because
Sure.
the opponents, there's a committee raising money and putting stuff together to oppose this. They've been throwing out arguments for why they think signatures should be invalidated. They've raised some questions about some of the people who were collecting signatures for this, who were collecting signatures for another initiative down in Tucson, and a judge actually invalidated their signatures for a couple of reasons: residency issues, felony issues, and it's unknown how many signatures this could affect or whether or not the courts up here will agree with the courts in Tucson, but that's probably what the pending court case is going to focus on.
All right, Steve, we talked about this last week. Attorney General Tom Horne, and of course the order from the Yavapai County Attorney's Office, $400,000, pay it and do it fast. Now Attorney General Tom Horne says no.
Attorney General Horne says he has evidence indicating that he and Kathleen Wynne did not actually talk together, independent expenditure group. They did not actually
Explain what
plan.
that's all about.
Boy, Ted, how much time do we have?
Yeah.
Tom Horne is accused of being involved with Kathleen Wynne, who has an independent expenditure group, who's managing this, basically collaborating with her, corroborating with her on this particular campaign situation, actually helping write scripts for ads, which is a major no-no. And Horne is saying at this point that he was not directly involved. He can, as a candidate, have some involvement in it, but phone calls that he made to Wynne and vice versa were after the fact, were not about that particular topic. Most people seem pretty confused about this, and the fact that 2 county attorneys now have said, we think Tom Horne is wrong about this, it seems sketchy, but he has been standing on this all along that he didn't violate anything. And if we look at if we get on that Occam's razor right there, who knows what's exactly right?
Quotes from the Attorney General: facts in the allegations are false. It's an interesting way to put that. He also says he has documentary evidence. What is the documentary evidence that he has shown so far? He's responded kinda, but not fully, has he?
Well, not really. I mean, the documentary evidence is not nearly as convincing as he tried to lead people to believe. He said, the crux of the Yavapai County Attorney's case comes down to, probably the strongest part of the case is a series of emails between Kathleen Wynne and the consultant who was working on this $500,000 TV ad. And they have records showing that in between all of these emails, Kathleen Wynne was calling Tom Horne, and it was, looks pretty bad. I mean, basically, she gets an email, calls him, gets off the phone with Horne, sends an email back to the consultant, gets a response back, calls Horne. Now, what Horne and Wynne put out the other day, the statement is showing that Kathleen Wynne called the treasurer of her campaign, and they say, well, she just told him to come over to the office, and that's who she was really talking to, because the emails say, well, we don't like the way this is worded, we want to change this. And Sheila Polk, the Yavapai County attorney, said, well, we is her and Tom Horne. She says, well, we is me and the treasurer, but that in no way, these records that Tom Horne put out in no way show that she wasn't still actually talking to Horne about this.
All right, thank you for that explanation.
What is the meaning of is
that detailed enough?
Yeah, that's detailed enough, and it's detailed enough to make you wonder who's buying this.
Well, Tom Horne is buying it, which at this point is pretty important, although, as we'll probably talk about a little bit later, he is a major challenger now in the Republican primary, and Mark Brnovich, former gaming director. I think one of the things interesting, before Jim pipes in here, is this concept that, okay, he's to pay $400,000 back, which I think we'd be stunned if he actually did that, but we're looking at this 3 years later. Felicia Rodolini came fairly close to beating him. Maybe she would have beaten him. We don't really know that. Maybe he would have eked it out. But the fact is he won the election, and now we're still talking about it 3 years later. These campaign finance laws are so absurd because it's so far after the fact that even if he admitted wrongdoing, which he never would, he still won the election.
Independent Expenditure Committee. The operative word here is independent. We just got through Jeremy's dissertation here as to what may have been going on. That doesn't sound all that independent.
Well, no, and that's really what the crux of the case is that this wasn't an independent effort, that it was a situation where the candidate was impermissibly coordinating with this committee. It's that is exactly what we're arguing about here, or what Tom Horne and the Yavapai County attorney are arguing about here. Politically, the interesting thing about this is, Steve talks about how this is 3 years later. It is, and this thing threatens to go well into the fourth year after, which is an election year, which, you talk about this thing being in the primary, and this thing may be going through the administrative process and the court process at the same time that Tom Horne's out there running. And so, politically, there is, if he's not exonerated or even if he is vindicated, depending on when that happens, it could still have a political, there could be a political backlash.
And the backlash could occur in the primary.
Absolutely.
He's got a challenger in the primary, and who knows what happens in the general.
Well, exactly. I spoke to a couple of Republican operatives this week and just asked them flat out, do you want Tom Horne to win this primary? And these were just a couple of people, and they said, absolutely not. We do not, because he's going to go in, even if Mark Brnovich isn't well known, Horne is such a wounded candidate by that point. And even the fact that he's been such a great campaigner over the years, maybe people have underestimated him over the years, he has come out on top. So will he do this again, even with all this stuff hanging over him? And is Rollini as good a candidate as maybe we thought she was 3 years ago? We don't really know that either.
Well, and the interesting point you bring up is whether it's court cases for the most part, campaigns for the most part, he does win. I mean, people do tend to underestimate Tom Horne. He tends to win.
No, he's been a survivor. One of my sources refers to him as a political street fighter, I think was the term. If you look at the primary against Andy Thomas a few years ago, now Thomas was badly wounded himself then. It was about as narrow a victory as you can get, but he did still win. But some things are going to be a little bit different if this is a rematch between him and Rodolini next year. As 2010 was the best Republican year in ages. It might be a good Republican year, but it's not going to be that good. Rodolini's been running for a long time, raising more money. She's probably not going to have a primary. So she's got some advantages she didn't have last time around, though.
All right, let's talk about these couple of Arizona campaign groups, these groups that have faced now a $1 million, sounds like a lot, a $1 million fine over in the state of California for violating California rules, regulations, perhaps even laws. They were facing $33 million, though. They didn't do all that badly over there.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, and to be sure, I mean, it's the largest fine this California Commission's ever levied against these similar committees, and in that respect, it's historic, and both sides claim victory, and realistically, I mean, I think that these two Arizona-based committees, I mean, they're the ones that came out on top in this deal, without a doubt. Like you said, I mean, they paid about 3% of the fine that they were facing potentially. A criminal investigation into them got closed. The civil investigation is now over, and they didn't have to disclose ultimately where the money came from. Even if it wasn't the actual people, they didn't have to disclose any further up kind of that nonprofit, a daisy chain.
Yes.
that we've talked about a lot. So at the end of the day, I mean, it was a business decision that okay, we can fight this. We're going to spend a couple $1 million on attorney's fees, or we can pay $1 million combined fine and get away from this thing and close it and walk away.
Talk about these groups. Who are they? What were they accused of doing by the state of California?
Well, there's a couple of groups. One is called Americans for Responsible Leadership, and they played a pretty big role in the elections here in Arizona last year. They put, I think, about $1.2 million fighting a couple of ballot measures. Another is a group called the Center to Protect Patient Rights. These are both more or less run by a local political operative named Sean Noble, who's very deeply connected to the Koch brothers. They're very wealthy businessmen who fund a lot of conservative causes. There's a number of other groups that Noble's involved with, and a lot of others that the Koch brothers are involved with, and they're pretty well known for kind of funneling money from one to the next to the next to the next, so that you never really know in the end where it came from originally.
In this case, Steve, it sounds like, tell us who was responsible. You amorphous group over here, and the amorphous group says this other amorphous group was responsible. I mean, it is a daisy chain, and we never did really find out, did we?
No, and this California Commission is interesting, Ted, because many people make fun of Arizona folks who are in favor of clean elections or in favor of term limits. All these good government groups is what they're called. And California actually was able to turn a good government group into a state commission. And they still don't have really any teeth because the laws are confusing. People want to say it's about Citizens United. This isn't really directly related to that, but there's a limb there, there's a tree, there's a connection, there's a root. So ultimately, I'm not sure where the information comes from.
Well, and you want to talk about the lack of teeth. I mean, it's okay. Like you said, I mean, had they forced the Center to Protect Patient Rights, excuse me, to disclose where it came from, again, it's another kind of amorphous group. There would be no way to get back to who actually gave the money, the people that gave the money, or the companies that gave the money, because at the end of the day, you've got IRS, federal tax law protections that say that these groups don't have to turn this information over, they don't have to make it public. So California could have all the laws in the world, or Arizona could, or any other state could. At the end of the day, until the IRS changes its guidelines and the federal tax code gets changed, it's not going to amount to a hill of beans.
We're going to see much of these two groups or groups like these two groups and perhaps folks associated with Sean Noble in the upcoming Arizona elections?
I don't think there's any question. I don't know about these two groups in particular, but there's so many others to take in place if it's not them. I mean, it's important to note that we don't have the same laws as California. These folks don't have to disclose really anything. You file a campaign finance report that says this came from company X, and it ends at that. You don't know where it came from, but.
Well, with that said, though, Steve, if you don't have to disclose, go ahead and spend. We're going to see a lot of spending next year?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason not to, Ted, because this is about winning. This is about getting your point of view across. It's not about really giving as much information to voters as we'd like to hear. I mean, Sean Noble worked for John Shadegg for many years. Shadegg was not a big fan of public campaign financing. I mean, this ideology is very clear.
You know, we're seeing some of these issues come up now with other groups tied to, you know, Sean Noble and Kirk Adams, who was running the Americans for Responsible Leadership Forum, at all this stuff going on with APS, where they acknowledged, after initially denying it, I believe, that they were putting money into these Noble and Adams groups that are fighting on this, that are putting out ads and fighting for changes in the net metering policies of the Corporation Commission, these solar energy policies.
Former Speaker of the House, Kirk Adams, is he making noise about doing anything politically here? Public office?
Oh, no public office.
No public
I
office.
think he's done with public office. Last time I talked to him, he said, no, never again.
Yes.
But what he is doing now is he's doing this consulting and this nonprofit, you know, these independent expenditures, and I think that's the area where he moved into. So, I mean, we're going to see him involved in Arizona politics and public policy, but from one of these outside groups, not in the sense of someone who's going to be actually down in the arena fighting the fight.
All right, Steve, it sounds as though the dual-track voting system, which the Attorney General said it's the only way we can abide by the law, and by the way, the Secretary of State kind of mentioned it, that this would be the only way. The Secretary of State's now going, I'm not too crazy about this idea.
Yeah, it didn't go too far, Ted. And I will leave some of the details to Jim and Jeremy because I'm a political animal, if nothing else. So for me, the interesting part of it is that Arizona is once again affiliated with Kansas. Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who we all know was involved with Russell Pierce very strongly with SB 1070. For me, the most intriguing part of this, again, is I wish Ken Bennett weren't running for another office, because then I could say, oh, he maybe actually really believes that this system needs to change. It's hard not to be cynical when we know he's running for governor and he wants to win the Republican primary.
And again, let's talk about what this dual-track voting, why the dual-track voting system would be in place, if it is in place, and what Ken Bennett wants, which is basically for the federal government to address this issue and change the way that they have federal registration forms, voter registration forms.
Yeah, he's trying to force this federal commission that doesn't actually have any members to make a change to the federal voting forms, the voter registration forms, at least the ones as they use them in Arizona and Kansas, to require people to show proof of citizenship in order to register. Arizona requires that. But the Supreme Court said that we can't refuse to take the federal forms too, which is where Bennett and Tom Horn came up with this idea for the dual-track system that if you use the state form, you can vote in all the elections, but if you only use the federal form that doesn't require this proof, then you can only vote in federal elections. It turns out, as we figured out pretty quickly, this is expensive, this is cumbersome, it's very unwieldy, and maybe it works better as a threat than in actual practice. So he's telling the federal courts now, well, this is really burdensome. We don't want to have to do this, so we want you to force this election commission to make this change.
But as Jeremy pointed out, and I think with alarming clarity, there is no one on the commission. There's an executive director, and I think Secretary of State Bennett wants the executive director. The executive can't do what he wants. I think it's a woman, her to do.
It does beg the question as to how the court can force a commission which has its own leeway and its own discretion to do things as it sees fit, but to do something when the commission itself exists in theory and maybe with some staff, but without actual commissioners. We will see. I'm assuming that'll be part of the argument, perhaps, from the federal government when they respond to this motion and say, we can't really do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ted, have you asked ASU Law Professor Paul Bender about this? Because it was confusing when Justice Scalia even threw that out as a possibility. I think most people said, oh, haha, that's funny. But now Secretary Bennett and Attorney General Horn have tried to take that bull by the horns. Well,
and the other interesting thing, too, is that I think there have been a couple of Democrats that have been nominated for this commission, but the Republicans have yet to nominate anyone for the commission, and the nominees, at best I can tell, haven't gone anywhere anyway. So,
Before we leave this, what are the Horn-Bennett dynamics in this whole thing? I mean, what are we seeing here? Anything?
Well, Bennett has to enforce the election laws, and the prosecutorial responsibilities go to the AG's office. In a more simplified version, Bennett's running for governor, Horn's running for re-election. They both have Republican primaries, if you want to look at it that way.
Political animal, what do you make of the dynamic?
Ted, I think what you're hoping for is a buddy film like we saw with Joe Arpaio and Andrew Thomas, and I'm not sure it fits with these two.
Well, I wasn't expecting a buddy film, not necessarily that, but okay, we'll move on here. No special session for the redistricting commission. What's going on with their funding? I mean, they have to have funds. They have to operate. Where are they going to get the funds and when?
Probably January. This is the long-running saga. I think the third fight of just 2013 over their funding. The Arizona Constitution requires the legislature to fund the redistricting commission. The legislature doesn't really like the redistricting commission, so they give them funding, but just enough to get them by for a little while. But every time they've needed more, the legislature has been in session to approve more. Now they're out of session. The commission warns that they could run out of money for legal expenses in December. If they don't, they can move forward some money they've socked away for like staff and operating expenses. But even then, it'll probably run out in the middle of January, right around the time the legislature comes back. So if the legislature doesn't basically immediately approve more funding, they're saying, we're gonna have to turn out the lights and lock up the building and fire the staff, and we won't even have anyone to pay staff to go to the legislature and ask for more money.
And that's if things are status quo. What happens if more legal stuff comes down the pike between now and then, or additional responsibilities are thrown onto the heap?
Well, I think that will really change the urgency in the debate here. That was something they discussed at the IRC at a meeting the other day. And that was something that they talked about at that, was the way it works right now, we think we can make it until the middle of January. But the giant caveat that if things change, if the courts come back and order us, say, to redraw maps,
Yes.
we're going to need some cash to do it. My guess is if the courts were to come back and say, those maps you drew are garbage, you've got to draw new ones, and you've got to follow these criteria, the Republicans would probably spring into action and show up and say, here is as much money as you need to get this done. But again, it kind of gets back to what Jeremy said. This has become kind of a little parlor game at the Capitol that, they toy with them. Maybe we're not going to fund you. But then the IRC goes, well, the Constitution says you have to, and we will win in court. And the Republican legislators stand up on the floor and say, I don't want to do this. I really don't like the IRC. They've abused the process, but we don't have a choice, so here's your money.
Right, but that's when you have a floor to stand on and a desk to pound on. I mean, until then, Steve, what could they sue?
Well, sure. I don't see why not. But then you also have to get into attorney's fees. I'm not sure Mary O'Grady would work pro bono. I don't really know at this point. But I almost feel like it's just so absurd. We go back to when Colleen Coyle Mathis was kicked off by Governor Brewer in the legislature, and then we went through the whole Supreme Court hearing. This is never-ending fun. I think we've got another decade to look forward to. 2020 hopefully will be that much more fun.
A number of topics for Arizona Horizon. We're looking forward to that. Before we go here, we found out that a gubernatorial candidate, Christine Jones, was convicted of DUI back in 2006. I think the arrest was in 2004. Then it was dismissed and was brought back. So I think she spent a day in jail, something along these lines. This is a candidate for governor, and she admits, she said, I messed up. I made a mistake. It was the worst, I did a bad thing, and I've moved on, and I learned my lesson. It was a hard lesson to learn. Is that going to be a lasting lesson?
Well, we'll see. If the primary turns out to be close, there's no doubt people are going to use that against her. And ironically, a few weeks ago, some reporters, I think it was from Channel 12, asked her, do you have anything in your past that may be a problem for this campaign? She said, nope, absolutely nothing. And a couple weeks later, we find this out. So it definitely could come back to haunt her, but time will tell.
7 years ago, a DUI, it wasn't a radical DUI. It wasn't too much, but it was a DUI, and she did. But again, there wasn't a lot of hemming and hawing here as far as her response.
No, that does help. It certainly helps not to bury something intentionally. We are also in a state, though, that has very, very strong DUI laws. And, it's funny, I actually thought that the GoDaddy racy ads were going to be a hard point for her. Now, again, not to bring up an issue that isn't vitally important, but, Governor Brewer had some issues that did she or didn't she in the past. She's been able to overcome it. Christine Jones probably not as politically savvy as the governor, but we don't know.
What do you think? Is this something that will opponents bring this up?
Only if she's in contention
in
the race. If she's not in contention, if she's running third or fourth in the race, no one's going to attack her over it because she's not a viable threat.
Will she be in contention? What kind of a candidate do you think she's going to be? We talked about this before, but again, there are so many folks on the Republican side.
And it's so hard to say because she's such an X factor. No one really knows anything about her. She hasn't been really involved in the political scene. A lot of people think she's probably got a good amount of money to spend, of her own money if she needs to. She's got a pretty good background.
And she might need to spend some of that money.
Well, we saw how that worked for Buzz Mills. And Will Carden. You need to have money and a story to tell.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what the story is and how it is told. Good stuff, gentlemen. Good to have you here. We didn't have time to talk about John McCain perhaps running for another term, but that'll be saved for another time. Thank you all for being here. Monday on Arizona Horizon, we'll speak with Bob Schieffer, longtime news correspondent for CBS News and this year's recipient of the Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism. That's Monday right here on Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You Have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.